Welcome, everyone. Tonight is our special board meeting of March 4th, 2021 of the Pleasanton Unified School District. Welcome, everyone, for this very brief meeting. We'd like to open the meeting by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight, this is a special board meeting, so we will not have any, what we call blue cards, any public comment on items not on the agenda. Special board meetings have public comment for items that are on the agenda. This meeting is being recorded, live streamed, and televised, and members of the public can participate via the Zoom link that we provided. Again, just to refresh everyone's memory, there is audio only from TV 30, and when you're making public comment, there will be a graphic of a public comment screen on the on your TV. If you're watching our meeting and also in the waiting room to make public comment, you should be following along on the TV because you won't be able to see it live. And you'll be let into the room at the time that is appropriate for the comment, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak on the item. Tonight, I think the introductions will take longer than the meeting, I hope, but I will introduce the folks in the room. We have our trustees, Mary Jo Carrion, Kelly McCaughey, Mark Miller, Steve Maher, and I'm Joan Larson. I'm serving as the president this year. Actually, you're right, Mark. As vice president, maybe we should have you sit here. I don't know. But anyway, it gets confusing. To my right is Dr. David Hagelin, the superintendent of schools. With us off the dais tonight, we have Assistant Superintendent Dr. Janelle Woodward, Teaching and Learning. We have Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Mr. Ed Dialazzo. Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. Julio Hernandez. Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Mr. Ahmed Sheikh-Sami. And we have Mr. Patrick Gannon, who is our Coordinator of Community Engagement and Communication. Did I get it right this time? So, tonight, as a special board meeting, we have a very short agenda. Is there any changes that anyone would like to make to the agenda, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. I don't think we need any discussion. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
McCaughey?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? Aye. And aye. All right, so we have a couple of items on our consent agenda. And again, typically a consent agenda is for items that are relatively routine in nature and allow us to expedite their approval so that we can spend more time on the action items. However, if any board member wishes to pull an item for further discussion, they can. So is there any one who'd like to pull an item off the consent tonight? Seeing none, I'll seek a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Oops, did I have a first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Want to make the first?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Okay.
Sorry, I heard wrong. I'll
That's all
second
right.
it.
Trustee Larson.
I
the
am
President,
wearing two masks.
Can I make a comment about one of the items now that you have your motion?
Sure, wait, hold on. So I have Mark moved and Kelly seconded.
Yes.
Okay. Discussion.
I just want to make clear that the 3.2, the temporary increase of certificated substitute teacher pay, is a temporary rate. It does not replace the standard rate that's in the CBA. Therefore, there would be no impact to what is charged teachers during this time. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you for that clarification. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there no further discussion? Is there any public comment? No? Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
McCaughey?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? Larson? Aye. Okay. And so now we've moved on to our report discussion and possible action tonight. We have item 4.1, which is very excited to be discussing and approving the MOU between our Association of Pleasanton Teachers related to our safety protocols. Dr. Haglund, did you want to introduce anything else, or should I throw it over to Mr.
I
Hernandez?
think we're going to let Mr. Hernandez carry this one.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, President Larson, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Haglund, staff and community. So before the board is a tentative agreement between the Association of Pleasanton Teachers and the district. It took 28 negotiation sessions. It was quite an involved process. I do appreciate our APT unit and the negotiating team, and it was a difficult process, but I think a rewarding one that bared some fruit today, as today was our first day of in-person instruction for our preschool second graders. So do appreciate that effort from everybody in getting to this tentative agreement. The agreement outlines our safety measures. If I could just start with the general provisions on page 1. It outlines our procurement plan, which is the process by which our staff would be able to access PPE. It also includes our cadence for cleaning classrooms and maintaining our facilities disinfected. There is language in our page 2 dealing with hand washing and sanitizing protocols, our daily and disinfecting schedules. On page 3, there is the PPE process and the procurement plan. It does allow for accommodations, meaning that if there is a unit member who feels that they need additional PPE or different types of PPE, they can engage the interactive process in order to obtain that. There's language there on the bathroom cleaning. On page 4, signage, keeping the 6 feet distancing protocols and guidance from the county. On page 5, visitors are all expected to follow the county guidance, meaning that they must wear a mask. We are limiting access of visitors to essential visitors, meaning the parents and guardians. Obviously, we cannot deny them their parental rights. It also includes the HVAC and airflow. I believe Mr. Shiko Salami has stated that we have 100% now MERV 13 filters on our campuses, as well as air purifiers, which are located inside classrooms. Safety procedures are also listed on page 5, and it continues on page 6. On page 6 at the bottom, it states our stable groups and the guidance from the county, and that we would adhere to those. It also states that we'll be issuing a plexiglass to each teacher in the classroom. Also on page 7, it has a cadence for testing, and we are already engaged in that testing. It's at no charge to the employee. We are asking for their insurance information so that we could send the bill to their insurance company. Vaccination language is on test 9. We are strongly encouraging our employees to get vaccinated. In fact, we have released priority 1 and priority 2 codes that were given to us from the County Office of Education to ensure that our employees are getting vaccinated. Members' leaves and absences, there is language that is already in the collective bargaining agreement, as well as current language in the education code related to leaves and covering of leaves. The understanding is that if an employee is somehow quarantined by the city, which is not likely, but by the county, that member's leave will not be taxed. But if otherwise, other circumstances, that member's leave will be. And there is a distinction there. The language that 6.2.5 has been in existence for quite some time. It is not new language. Workers' comp. We will challenge workers' comp claim. It used to be that we did not have to or told not to, but any workers' comp claim, we will be challenging the workers' comp claim to determine if the employee actually was infected or came in contact with COVID-19 in the workplace. The instructional schedules are also listed for elementary school on page 9. The Wednesday schedules, which will remain the same, are also listed there on page 9. Student assessments are listed on page 10, and the need for our professional duties for our itinerant staff, our psychologists, speech pathologists, and special ed. Those requirements are listed on page 10. Page 11, investigation on COVID tracing, what it is that the cadence should be able to do that. It also provides for childcare for our employees for a fee. There is an interest in our employees, for those who have children, to be able to access childcare. We are providing that access to that childcare for our employees. There is also language about volunteering. There's also language at the bottom of 11 on a 0.55. The association of the district last year came to a collective bargaining agreement where the association was awarded a 0.55 one time only for professional development. And what this language states is that for 2 hours will be given to the APT members. Out of the 0.55, there's about 4.5 hours still left in the 0.55 that still need to be allocated for professional development. But 2 hours of that time will be paid to APT members for doing the COVID trainings. And the COVID trainings are listed on page 12. And on page 12 also states the expiration of the MOU, which is June 30th, or if there's a declaration that this pandemic is over by the governor. That's a quick synopsis of the MOU. If there's any questions that I can entertain, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions? Mr. Maher?
Julio, you mentioned daycare. How many sites do we have daycare for our staff?
I believe there's currently one site that's providing daycare, but I'll ask Mr. Dialazo if he could help us with that question.
So that's correct. It's currently located at Moore. There's one classroom that's providing the staff childcare program.
Are we looking to open up any more for some schools that may have more than 10 children at that site that need daycare from staff? I don't know if that's the case, but
Our plan is to expand the program based on need. So we have communicated out that, and Mr. Diaz could also assist in that, we have communicated with staff, letting them know that we do have childcare. Mr. Diaz, do you know how many have responded?
So we put out a survey probably a couple of weeks ago in preparation for reopening. We did not get a lot of return on that survey in terms of interested staff. We can definitely put it out again. I don't have the exact number, Mr. Hernandez, but I know it was a pretty low number that did not reach a threshold where we would open a second class. But we can put out that survey again and see who's interested, and we're more than willing to expand if needed.
is it kind of a prorated fee or?
There is a fee structure. It's less than our Kids Club program, but also there is a sliding scale depending on the needs of the employee.
Thank you.
Other questions?
President Larson, just one follow-up question to Trustee Maher. We had some email communication about the change of rate offered for staff, that it seemed to change from the beginning of the school year to now. And if so, can you explain why that was, or perhaps the change of fee? There was some expression of the concern of cost that was being offered for staff for the access to the child daycare.
So it had to do with hours. So it just really depended on the number of hours that we're providing for service. So I believe it did expand once we were planning to reopen school in terms of the number of hours for childcare. So we had to change the rate based on the number of hours that we're providing.
I couldn't quite hear that. Could you say it a little bit louder? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the rate changed due to the number of hours of service that we're providing. So in preparation for reopening, the number of hours increased, therefore the need for additional fee was required. So we changed the fee structure based on the number of hours that were available for the service.
When you looked at fees that are charged for childcare services in the area, how does this rate compare?
I don't have the rates in front of me, but it's a really good rate. So some of the fees in the area, $1,200 a day, $1,300 a day, I believe, and ours is about $700 or $800. Excuse me, not per day, per month. So it is a really good fee for our staff in terms of what's competitive rates out in the community or in the Tri-Valley. So yeah, it is a pretty good rate.
I also want to reiterate that we do have, and I forget the term, but it was somewhat of a grant for those employees that were hourly employees and mostly child nutrition and others that weren't able to meet that cost a month. So there is an ability for an employee to request assistance. So we do have that vehicle to be able to provide that. But that requires the employee to engage in the interactive process. We don't want to discuss individual circumstances because everybody's circumstance is unique, but we are working with our employees with that regard.
Okay, so then just one follow-up question to that. What again is the protocol in place for working staff who have children in the district and expectations for access with teachers working remotely and having their children in classrooms? Is that an option, or what is the policy on that? Because I know there's been some questions about that and considerations, so just for clarification.
Thank you for that question. So we are asking staff to have access to our child care program. We did allow our staff to have their children in school, where everybody was working remotely. That is no longer the practice that we want to engage in. For one reason is the employee may be asked to be doing other duties that may conflict with taking care or supervising that student's. So the other is that APT did request the accommodation to continue that practice. We did negotiate that and we rejected the language. APT accepted that. So that language is not in our MOU. That said, we want to work with our employees. We understand that there is a child care need, hence the reason why we established the child care, why we increased the hours. If there's a need to modify our child care program based on the need, we're willing to work with our employees. If there's a need for cost, we are willing to work with our employees there. It just depends on what those needs are and engaging us in the process so that we can determine how best to assist those employees. There's a lot of challenges out there. We're still in the pandemic, and we understand that, and we're trying to be as flexible as we can with our employees. That said, it's not in the MOU, but that doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do to help our employees navigate childcare.
Okay, absolutely. And just to reiterate what you said, so if an employee had concerns, then they would go to you and start the interactive process to engage, to help get some additional clarification if they had some concerns and wanted to discuss that further, correct?
That's correct, Trustee. Again, I'd urge all of our employees that whatever the circumstance may be, part of the process is engaging us in a conversation as to what those needs are. All the needs are unique to that family and to that teacher, and we are all working together to try to figure a way to make it work. Again, we're not trying to penalize our employees. We are still trying to get to reopening school and return to some semblance of normalcy, pre-COVID, whatever that may be. But we don't want to hurt our employees, again, in the child care need or any other need. But it requires an interactive with Nancy Bronzini, Mike Williams, or myself so that we could gauge what the needs are and find a solution.
Great, I appreciate that clarification. So, and to your point, so if there's additional requests for leave of absence, that would also start the interactive process. So thank you for that clarification. Those are all my questions right now.
Anyone else? Question? I had one question, but I would like to kind of make a quick comment on that. And that is, we've offered the employee childcare for a year now, actually, and it was included in the governor's, in the guidance and in the rules that came out last spring. And, I totally agree with Mr. Hernandez about wanting to support our staff, but it's also important to understand that the accommodations for that childcare for our employees who are required to work for the district, was something that was afforded to employees of school districts. It was not afforded to other sectors in our economy. And so, I really hope people will call Nancy and work on an interactive process. This is not something that's offered to other people in private industry or our families for that matter. So, please contact HR to have that conversation. My question was about a little bit, it seemed a little confusing to me. There's a couple of parts that talk about teachers who are providing services on multiple sites or versus whether or not it's included in a student's IEP, whether it's going to be in person or in remote or asynchronous during the synchronous time or asynchronous time. Can you kind of just pull that together for me? There's a couple of spots there that it seems a little bit confusing.
I'll try to take a stab. So at the negotiating table, the request was that all staff, including itinerant staff, that would be our psychologists, speech pathologists, and others, will be allowed to continue to work remotely. We rejected that language. What we agreed to was that classroom teachers who were working remotely would continue to be allowed to work remotely. The reason why is that our speech pathologists, our psychologists, and others may be required to come to an in-person IEP meeting, SST meeting, may be required to provide other professional duties that we would have to wait for them to travel from wherever the remote place is, one would assume home, to come to provide those services. So we did have a robust discussion at the negotiating table on that item, and we ended up rejecting, and APT accepted that change, that it only impacts in classroom teachers, not other itinerant staff.
Okay, that still doesn't clear it up for me. So students who receive services, unless it's agreed that's in their IEP, unless it's agreed by all parties to accept those services remotely, those services will be provided in person?
So there's, I guess, two questions. One is the general, but yes, in IEPs, SSTs, if there's not a mutual agreement, they're held in person.
Okay.
So if everybody in the IEP team, the SST team agrees to hold the meeting remotely, that would be honored. If one of the members of the team is in disagreement, it automatically defaults into in-person SST meeting, IEP meeting.
And so other services like resource, or, just the other interventions that we provide to students that are not necessarily in an IEP, so are those, if they want to serve those, do those remotely, can they do those remotely, or do they need to be in person as well? I know, that's why I'm...
That's so it's definitely defined in the MOU, the IEP, SST, those official meetings are definitely defined in the MOU, that if there's not a mutual agreement, they will be held in person. There's a professional duty for APT. It's in the MOU on August 11th.
Okay.
There's also this current MOU that our employees have to perform. What's specifically carved out is classroom teacher that's working remotely. All other staff that are providing interventions, coaches, and so forth are not included in that language. So I'm trying to gauge an intervention teacher that's providing in-person service will continue to provide in-person service.
Okay.
If there's a remote assignment, and then I believe that would be the modem that the mode that the teacher will continue to provide instruction. So I'm not sure what the intervention would be, because if the child's family decided to be completely 100% remote, we would have to provide those interventions remotely.
I guess I was just looking at the related service providers, and it's saying we'll have the option to work remotely, or we'll have unit members who serve students on multiple sites or in multiple cohorts will have the option to work remotely, or will have access to a workspace not shared with other employees on the same day.
So that is determined by the administrator.
Okay.
So if there's space issues, we are allowing, if there's a rotating, meaning that there's one small office where there's 6 people in there and they're not able to socially distance or physically distance, that they're given the opportunity to either find another space or be given the opportunity to work remotely.
So that's up to the administrator at the site.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's all based on the space and the need. There are some school sites that have very limited space issues, and we had to provide that accommodation.
Okay, thank you. That does clear it up for me. Well, if there's no further questions, I'll seek a motion to approve. Oh, I didn't hear Patrick, sorry.
We have one public comment this evening, President Larson, and
Go
that
ahead.
is Michelle Verkailan. So if you're with us, go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening, President Larson, members of the board, Dr. Haglund, members of the cabinet, and our community. I am Michelle Verkailan, president of the Association of Pleasanton Teachers. Pleasanton students and staff deserve safe and healthy schools. I would like to thank all the people who worked so many long and arduous hours to make this MOU happen. Ensuring we have safe and healthy schools for staff and students is of the utmost importance to all of us. One of the committees in which I am engaged is the Risk Mitigation Steering Committee. We know that implementing a multifaceted, layered approach is the best way to mitigate the risks of COVID-19. One of those layers is reducing person-to-person contact. We know that adult-to-adult interactions result in higher transmission than young children-to-adult interactions. We believe that reducing adult-to-adult interaction is one of the most important and probably one of the easiest layers to implement in schools. We can control this by limiting unnecessary people on campus, by holding meetings remotely, and by working remotely when not with our in-person students. We hope the district will continue to work with us to further implement this vital layer in COVID-19 risk mitigation. As things progress in reopening, we are confident that district management will monitor the ever-changing needs and collaborate with their employees to help keep them and their families safe. Being sensitive to employees' health and welfare shows us you care and that you want us to continue to be able to serve our students. Per the governor's recent decision to give districts funding for the reopening of schools, we know that you will work with our associations to ensure that these funds directly address the needs of our students and staff in working and learning during a pandemic. Helping our students recover from this pandemic will take all of us working together. The additional finances that the district now will be receiving should be used in investing in our students' social emotional well-being, which has never been more important. We look forward to working together to develop a plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And that was the only public comment? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
I'll second it.
To approve the MOU?
Yes.
Okay, so that was Mary Jo and Kelly. Any further discussion? Okay, trustee Carrion,
Aye.
Makashi,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Maher, Larson, aye. 5-0. Congratulations. I just would really echo Michelle's words and thank the negotiating teams both on the district side of the table and also on APT side. You know, to say that this has been a complicated year is the understatement of the century, actually. So navigating all of those changes and all of the different concerns that everybody has just been a monumental task on everybody's plate. So I really want to thank everybody for their hard work. And with that, I think we have another meeting next week, the weekly meetings that we apparently have. So March 11th is a regularly scheduled school board meeting, and until then, we are adjourned.